Welcome to an exciting Park Forum. It's my pleasure to welcome Adam Cheyer. As you know, Adam is a co-founder and vice president of engineering at Viv Labs, which was acquired by Samsung in 2016, where they're building an intelligent interface, an intelligent assistant for the world, right? But before that, he was a co-founder of Siri, which was acquired by Apple in 2010. And before that, and along those lines, he's also done co-founded Sentient Technologies. And if that was not enough, he is a co-founder and advisor to Change.org, which is, as you know, one of the premier social organizations for positive societal change. So it's a pleasure to have him here. He's been involved on the AI scene since 1993. Some of the things he'll talk about here are sort of an outgrowth of thinking that he's had and things that he's seen evolve over all the period. And the topic is an interesting one, right? So as Adam says, he's seen advances in the last few years in AI that he didn't think he would see. So what does that mean for us as a society, for us as the primal sort of species on Earth? What does that mean? And that's the topic for Adam's talk today. And if all of that isn't enough, Adam also does magic tricks during his talk, so I hope you will get enjoy that as well.
Thank you, Raj. So I'm happy to be talking to you today. The general topic will be on artificial intelligence, my views. My views will probably be different than your views, and hopefully we'll have a little discussion during the Q&A period. So I've been working in the field of AI for 30 years, more than 30 years. Some of you maybe even a little bit more than that than me, so I'm a relative young'un. But as Raj mentioned, in the past decade or so, there are things that have happened in the field of AI that I never thought would see in my lifetime. And when you work in other industries, that's a pretty rare statement. Here I was, kind of happily going along. I see an improvement. I see an evolution. 20 years in, it's all going, more or less according to my expectations. And then there was this hockey stick growth where time after time I was like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. I didn't think that was possible. So let me give you a few examples. It's my story, so I'm going to start where I want. I'm going to mention Siri as one of those things. Now, I hoped it was possible, but I didn't know if I actually believed it would be possible, certainly at the scale that it took place. So on February 2010, in my last 10-year timeline, a small startup, a few friends of mine, we spun out of SRI International, and we launched a free app in the App Store. And the idea was to be a conversational experience to a wide variety of services. Now, I know places like Park and SRI, research and conversation had existed for a long time, but there were some real hard challenges that we had to succeed at. I remember the day when we first added in 30 million business names, and our prototype, which had been working well for all sorts of things, booking reservations, etc. All of a sudden, we did the key command word, start over, right? That's supposed to get it to an initial state, and it said, looking for businesses named Over and Start Mississippi. And I'm like, whoa, what just happened? And I quickly learned that doing fuzzy matching over 30 million business names, where every word in the English language is a business name, was an interesting challenge that went beyond where we had done in our research prototypes. So we launched the assistant. All things are going well. One thing I'm really proud of, Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, and also Apple fanboy Steve Wozniak, is on video multiple times when asked, what's your favorite app of all time? He says, Siri. It was actually the original Siri, not the version that came out in the iPhone later. This was, it surprised him and surpassed his expectations of intelligence with software. And he still tells that story today. So he's happy. We have an app out there. It turns out another co-founder was watching of Apple, Steve Jobs, and we get this phone call about 2 or 3 weeks after launching, and we hear, "Hey, it's Steve. What you doing? Want to come over to my house tomorrow?" And we're like, "Steve, how'd you get this number?" Because we were like, we started as stealthcompany.com, and there was no address or phone number on our website. But you could argue that Steve Jobs, having reinvented so many fields, including the movie industry with Pixar, computer industry with personal computing, music with iPod, mobile with apps, you could make a claim that he saw the coming wave of artificial intelligence before anyone else. And so at a conference at D8, 1 year after we had launched and Apple had acquired us, he was asked by Walt Mossberg, "Why did you buy that search company?" He goes, "They're not a search company. They're an AI company." And no one in 2010 really knew, what does that even mean? What's different? So that I think is kind of the first drip in the series of events that now artificial intelligence is a big topic, and if I put it on my slides, 200 people show up in this room, right? That wasn't the case. And if you go back 10 years before this time, there's not that much in terms of mass consumer adoption of AI that happened. So it was, for me, a drip, 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 and then came a lot of things. So let's go quickly through this. January 2011, IBM came out with a program called Watson that could play Jeopardy at human or even superhuman level scale. It beat Ken Jennings and some of the top Jeopardy players in the world. And this blew my mind, right? This was not just information retrieval, looking up some fact that existed. When I saw this system answer the question, Batman and Robin Hood, I'm like, whoa. That is not a fact or a phrase that's probably in a database pre-concocted. It was able to understand the language question, reason about what are the appropriate answers, and come up with something like that. I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. It was super clever of IBM to realize it was doable, and they had done that with maybe Deep Blue previously. But they found an opportunity that was beyond my expectations, and yet they pulled it off. And so they surprised me, like, that's really cool. I didn't know you could do that. October 2011, Apple launched their version of Siri in the iPhone. October 4th, the very next day, Steve Jobs died. So you can really say Siri was his last baby, his last creation. He was involved heavily for the first 9 out of the 18 months that we were working at Apple before the launch, and really cared about this, really understood and saw the vision for this future that was, that was coming. So we launched Siri, and what followed, the next 6 months or 2 quarters broke every tech record in terms of profit margins, selling only the iPhone 4 with Siri, called the iPhone 4S. It was literally the same phone. And every record was surpassed. The stock price the day before Siri came out was $350. 6 months later, with just the iPhone 4S, Apple stock was at $650. It surpassed Exxon to become the most valuable market cap company in the world. And Siri was the beginning of this revolution, this interface revolution, at least socially. People were talking about it, et cetera. So Apple becomes the most valuable company of all time. December 2013, Google by now has acquired 8 robot companies. You're like, what? I didn't see that coming. Aren't they a search engine? Let me just give a quick, in case you haven't been following Boston Dynamics and some of the things they do. Here's a minute-long clip. They have more advanced versions now that are humanoids that can do backflips and open doors. It's crazy. This, by the way, is not the head that you saw. It's the hand. You'll see it in action right here. The way these things move, just a bucket of wires and plastic, it actually makes you empathize for them in a way that I never expected. See what I mean? I mean, it's crazy. Kind of feel sorry for the little guy. So that gives you an idea, and again, this is a couple years old now, but I never saw robotics that could move like that. And I'm worked for over a decade at SRI, where I'm used to robots wandering the halls and bumping into doors and things like that. I didn't see that coming, honestly. October 2015, I'll tell you kind of a personal story. So my wife buys a Tesla Model S, and every once in a while she let me borrow it. And I'm driving in the car on the highway with my son, so he'd be 15 at this age. And my son Noah has mastered teenage blasé to the nth degree, right? So he's sitting there, and I'm like, hey, Noah, want to see the coolest thing, the most significant tech invention since Siri? And that's a pretty big statement in our household. I don't know about you. He's like, yeah, Dad, whatever. And I'm driving along, and I lift my arms off of the steering wheel, and we're coming up to a curve. And the car seamlessly navigates around the curve under its own power. And my son freaks out, Dad, that's insane! And I'm like, I know. And the coolest part was this was an over-the-air update. The day before, the car didn't do that, right? I mean, can you imagine the adding capability of this, self-driving in certain conditions, keep your hands on the steering wheel, as an over-the-air update? I mean, never have I received a mobile phone update that was so significant, really in such an advance. It was pretty amazing. I'll also give just a little bit of credit here. So when I was at SRI, we worked on a DARPA project called PAL and CALO. And Tony Tether, who funded probably 1,000 different projects, this was in the mid-2000s, his two babies were really a personal assistant and the DARPA Grand Challenge self-driving car. So you can actually now, what's the two hottest topics maybe in AI? It's self-driving cars and personal assistant wars. So you got to tip a hat to Tony Tether for maybe seeing or seeding the future. 2016, AlphaGo. So you're like, yeah, it's just another game. Deep Blue did the chess playing thing in the 90s. What's the big deal? Well, for those in the know, this was a really big deal because the combinatorics of the game kind of eliminated pure brute force. And the people who I talked to in the space said, oh, Go will not be solved for decades. And then lo and behold, you get Lee Sedol, one of the world's greatest Go players, losing a match to a machine. And I think the score, you guys will probably know better than I, was something like 3-1 or something like that, right? 4-1. So an impressive victory against one of the world's greatest humans. And then, if that's not enough, DeepMind, a Google company, came out with something called AlphaGo Zero. What's the difference? It can beat humans too. What's the big deal? Well, AlphaGo was trained on probably thousands of the top human Go games ever played. So it learned how to play Go at a master level. by watching the best humans in the world. Well, AlphaGo Zero was not given access to that. It was given zero knowledge up front. And they took the program and they played it against itself gazillions of times. And what emerged was a system that was not biased or constrained by what those puny human brains do. It was unconstrained and unfettered to come up with solutions that could far surpass anything we've ever conceived of on its own. Pretty heavy stuff. And it never played against the top human. However, it did play against AlphaGo, the original, which beat the best humans, and it won 100-0 against this game. So we can't even conceive of how much better the solution it derived on its own is against the previous version, which was trained on human training. Never saw that coming. Pretty amazing. 2017, for me, 2017 was the age of, AI applied to cancer. I mean, there are many things in 2017, but if I were to pick one, that's what excited me the most. Paper after paper were coming out saying that AI enhancing a human's ability to diagnose can have critical improvements against human doctors alone. And one study I saw, I think out of Harvard, on breast cancer was saying 30% of mastectomies could be avoided because they're done and there's no actual cancer there by more accurate diagnoses at the level of AI enhancing human programmers. And having false positives in this area has significant cost and emotional trauma, etc. So this was examples of AI having material impact on a doctor's ability to make a correct diagnosis. It's not replacing a doctor, it's augmenting. But the ability to scan images in radiology is really impressive. So AI in the last 10 years surprised me. Maybe you guys all saw it coming. But things happen that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. So what does this mean? Where are we going? And to the title of the talk, do we need to be afraid? So Ray Kurzweil is a famous prognosticator. He works now at Google and part of the Google Brain project. He is famous for writing down predictions. He's not always right, but he is a lot of the time. And he wrote a book called The Singularity is Near, which said that by 2029, we will achieve the singularity. That means the intellect of computers will surpass that of humans. That's a pretty big statement. In case you didn't do the math yet, that's 11 years from now. Seriously. And there were a number of people, I guess I don't have the quotes here, who kind of followed up on that. So Elon Musk came out and basically said, we are unleashing the demon. I've seen the movie, it doesn't end well. That's a quote from Elon. And Stephen Hawking also said that AI, if it gets out, could be the most impactful thing for humanity in a bad way, right? If we were faced with an intelligence greater than ours, what would this mean for humanity? We've kind of risen to the top of the food chain because of our smarts. So what are my views on this? And you may have different views. In my view, we've had enormous progress on applied AI for specific problems, solving cancer, driving cars, providing some kind of interface, voice and conversational interfaces, a number of things that we just saw. But we've made almost no progress on what's called general intelligence. A 2-year-old can observe a situation that they've never seen before extract out that essence of it somehow, and then apply what they're seeing to things they've seen that are somewhat similar, and do the right thing. And again, you guys may be more expert than I, but the people I've talked to don't know how to do this well. And some will say if you create enough vertical applications and you line them all up in a row, maybe somehow miraculously it can do everything, and voila, we now have general intelligence. Enough vertical intelligence is equals general. I don't believe that. And so in my view, we really don't have anything to be afraid of yet. The techniques that I've seen are not making progress. Now, could it happen? It's possible. But we need something fundamentally different from what I've seen tried before. And most of the people that I talk to in the field agree. And Andrew Ng, he was founder of Coursera and was at the and I think started the Google Brain project at Google, led AI at Baidu for a while. He has a great story. He says, people come up to me and say, well, think about Mars. Someday we're going to, we're going to leave and we're going to send humans to Mars, and they're going to procreate and multiply. And soon we're going to have an overpopulation problem on Mars. There's going to be smog. We're going to use up all the resources. Why aren't you doing anything about the overpopulation problem on Mars? And he's like, I don't have anything to start from. We're not even there yet, right? And he makes the analogy to AI in the same way. Yes, we have very applied applications, and there are ethical issues, don't get me wrong, about some of those applications. But the true AI, in terms of meeting an intelligence that's as general and flexible as our own, we are not there yet. Last thing I'd like to say on this topic is to give you an example. When you use Siri or some of the other assistants, sometimes it feels like you're talking to an intelligent being. Sometimes just that moment, it'll say something that makes you laugh, or it'll surprise you in a way. And it feels, for just that moment, like it might be human, like it might be intelligence. But I'm here to tell you it's just a simulation, right? It's under the hood, it's a series of coded dialogues or rules or what have you, and it's not you or me. I'll give you an example. If I were to take some duct tape, just play along with me for a second, and I were to do this, it kind of looks like I'm wearing a tie. Those in the back squint a little bit. But it's not a tie. It's just a simulation. And someday, we might invent this new technology that doesn't exist yet that lets you change molecules. I mean, we're all made of atoms, right? Ties and duct tape. But we're not there yet, and I don't know how we're going to get there. We need something fundamentally different. It could theoretically be possible, but it's not. So that's my view on AI. AI is a simulation today. We don't have, this is just duct tape, so there's nothing to worry about. All right. Okay. So what I'd like to do in the next part of the talk is actually talk a little bit more about where is AI being applied. Is it a panacea for business? And give a few examples. These examples will be from a company I started called Sentient. I think they have a big compute machine learning infrastructure, and I think they're super clever in finding ways to apply machine learning to real problems. So the first thing that they started out with was in finance. They said, a lot of people trade stocks. I wonder if we could automate stock trading, not the high-speed type, but the real reason trading, and outperform humans in this domain. If you could, a lot of money in that, right? So they use genetic algorithms And they literally evolved this random pool. They started with a random pool of automated traders, and they evolved the rules over which they were trading and harvested the best performing ones, mated them, mutated them, and eventually grew through trillions of evolutions, teams of traders who would trade on a live stock market in kind of a quant fund style approach. It performed super well. They've spun this off into a separate joint venture with a big financial company. So there's one application where you're like, okay, I could kind of see that coming. Let's give a few more. Healthcare, same company, same infrastructure. Sepsis is the #1 killer if you go to an intensive care unit. Sepsis is an arterial blood pressure spike. If that happens, doctors come running. It's a big, scary thing. A lot of people die. And they worked, I believe, with MIT to do an analysis on the data that's already being collected when you're hooked up in an ICU. And they were able to make a predictor using machine learning that would give doctors a 30-minute window with over 90% accuracy. And that's enough to save lives. They can take corrective action. I think that's just one. We already talked about cancer and radiology being transformed by machine vision algorithms. There's a huge field. One of my favorite machine learning researchers, Daphne Koller, who founded Coursera along with Andrew Ng, left and went to Calico Commerce, which is Google's longevity company. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Why would you leave your own company? And she said, in AI and machine learning, it's all about the data. And there's an incredible amount of data that's coming available in the healthcare space, and there's huge opportunities for work in that area. Genomics. So today, it's been shown that certain mutations in the human genome are correlated with certain disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, et cetera. But no one to date has provided multi-mutation correlations because the combinatorics get so large. To be able to say, if you have this mutation and this mutation, together that makes a higher predictor of this particular disease. And so Sentient has been working, again, with some universities to try to find a way to model that project and be able to be the first in the field to really show multi-mutation genome correlation. Agriculture. Say what? That's not kind of the industry I would have picked to be on the cutting edge of AI and machine learning. Turns out that 10,000 years we've been growing food, and we don't know the optimal way to do it, right? We have these beliefs. So this is a spin out of MIT. It's called OpenAg. And what they built is a food cube that's completely instrumented. They can control humidity, temperature, water, moisture, all of the different factors. And they have sensors, cameras to detect the yield of things, and they have special flavor testers. And the idea is that they'll install these food cubes in cities, grow the food right there, and you eliminate transportation costs, everything's fresh and cheap. So they worked with Sentient to say, well, what is the right sequence of operations to grow the optimal food? And through iterations and experiments guided by machine learning, they were able to, one, discover things that we already knew, like yield and taste are counter-correlated, so the small blueberries taste better than the big ones and things like that. People already knew that. But they also found some non-intuitive results, which they've published, one having to do with light. So it was thought that plants, like most animals on Earth, benefit from the up-down behavior of the sun, where there's downtime. And it turned out that if you have continuous light over a certain period of the growth of the plants, you actually improve yield and taste. Who knew, right? So there are things that we can discover in this space that I think is super interesting. E-commerce. So have you ever heard of A/B testing? A/B testing says, well, there are certain little aspects, maybe the color of a button or the wording on this web page, that actually significantly influences buying behavior. And so people will do huge tests where they make 2 versions of the websites and they send half the traffic to one and half the traffic to the other, and they measure and they figure out, okay, blue button performs better than red button. What Sentient does, I think this is super clever, they again use genetic algorithms, and they literally evolve versions of your site in real time using hundreds of different factors and all their combinatorics. And what happens is it starts random, and so it's lower performing than your carefully human designed, super consulted, designer website. But rapidly, in a few iterations, it starts to converge on solutions that are getting better click rates or better purchase rates or whatever your metric is, and it will go up to 40% better in this continual improvement process. All automated. You don't have to run 2 separate experiments. You're running tens or hundreds of thousands of experiments and converging towards a solution that is making you money almost from the beginning of the experiment. So for me, this just makes all the sense in the world. And the killer app, shoes. So we've shown AI can revolutionize healthcare, genomics, food production, shoes. So this is Al Anwar. He's the shoe whisperer at Nordstrom's. This is a big business. And so what could AI do in shoes? Well, it turns out shoes, and many other things like shoes, have large catalogs. There are typically hundreds of thousands of items, and they're not easily discoverable by keywords. Because what is a shoe design? It's the curve of the arch and the point of the toe and the style of the tassel and I don't even know what. I don't know what would you call these? They're shoes, right, exactly. But the point is, you can't search that catalog very well. And so what they do is Sentient analyzes from pure images a catalog. It starts to slice them into categories, and it generates visual 20 questions. It will show you, here are 10 shoes. Which one is the one you like or the one you're thinking of, most close to? And you go click, 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 click. And because it's informationally optimally generating the next set of questions, it converges through this massive space that you can't even describe, and they're staring at you as the shoe you were just thinking of. I think this is really, really clever. And of course, it applies to handbags and fashion. Anything that is really a visual aspect to it that's hard to determine. And so let me kind of end the talk with a statement that maybe you all know and believe, and maybe is complete hogwash from your perspective. I think we are sitting on the cusp of AI being the next UI, a global paradigm as important as the web or mobile itself. We are sitting at like 1994 when a web browser came out, and you were looking at this Mosaic browser going, what does this mean? I think that's where we are. In fact, every 10 years, the way people interact with computers changes. So mid-'80s, boom, a desktop arrives. You have to learn Windows and the mouse and a keyboard. 10 years later, the web, and it's all about hyperlinks and back buttons and URLs. 10 years later, the App Store emerges. Now you learn about pinch and zoom, etc. So if you notice, who's counting, this is the 10th anniversary of the App Store. And has anyone here said, I think I'll go to the App Store today and find a new shiny app to play with? Anybody? We've reached a certain level of maturity in the app model that I think it's now time to have the next global interface paradigm. And here we are, and we believe the assistant can be that paradigm. Notice that there was really a major winner and a minor winner for every paradigm. So the stakes are high. This is a race to the ubiquitous interface where probably there will be a major and a minor company that becomes the dominant technology company for the next decade. The Google of the web or the Microsoft of the PC era. So I'm working in that space. We created a technology company called Viv that's all about opening up an ecosystem, because we believe that doing that right and at scale is the key to unleashing this. Today, an assistant, there are lots of assistants. Hundreds of millions of users use Siri, and there's lots of Alexas in the world, et cetera. But let's be honest, while they're useful, they're not important. If I were to take away your browser, your smartphone, you'd be like, I can't function. If I say I'm taking away your assistant, you'd be like, a little inconvenient, but I can get by. I can look up the weather another way, right? And there's no business out there that is dependent on an assistant as a primary channel for their services or content. But I think that's about to change. So at Viv, we've defined 4 steps. That's our take on what it is to build an assistant. We believe you need one assistant. Today, with Alexa and Google and others, in effect, you are dealing with 30,000 different independent assistants. You have to say, Alexa, it wakes up. The core services, you can say, what's the weather? Set a timer. But to use a third-party service, you have to say, Alexa, ask App 7 to do Command 5. And I don't know about you, even though they have 30,000 different services, I can't remember 30,000 different names and command sets. I'm only going to use a handful, which is not enough to drive an ecosystem. So one assistant. I want to do this and access it across every device. I don't have time to remember, what does the TV assistant do and the car assistant and the watch? I can't keep track. I want one assistant that knows me, that I know what it can do, and that I can use wherever I am, contextually, because what I say to a TV, to my assistant through a TV, will be different than if I'm jogging with my smartwatch, perhaps, or washing dishes in the kitchen or on the door of the fridge. But it's the same assistant with a different context. Every service. So today, there is this separation between third-party developers and the built-in services that comes with a Siri or a Google or an Alexa. We say that third-party developers are really second-class citizens, because believe me, Google engineers are not using API.ai to build Google Assistant, right? They're not. You are given a separate set of services, very simple. Most of them are, here's the string, maybe a little help to parse, understand the parse, and you do whatever you want and give it back to me. So what we're trying to do with Viv is create a set of tools that democratize AI, that let any developer who has a website or a mobile app be able to publish an interface to their services that lives within a single assistant. And then personalized. So a lot of people use personalized in many ways. Usually it means learn that I like French restaurants and move that a little bit higher on the list. That's not what I'm talking about. Today, the assistants are the same for every user. If you use Siri and I use Siri, it's the same Siri for the two of us, right? It's similar if you go to in the web era, if you go to a Google search engine and type in a keyword, you and I are getting the same results within a percentage or two. It's the same for everybody. But your mobile experience is completely customized. Maybe we share 10, 15% of the same apps, but what makes your mobile experience special is you have all sorts of hobbies and brands and apps that you care about, and I've got a very different set, right? And we think an assistant should be personal at a level that there's a custom assistant shaped by every user. And Viv's technology will be the first assistant that I think on the market that enables this. So Viv sold a year ago to Samsung. Samsung came out with a technology called Bixby last year. That's not based on Viv technology. This is not an official Samsung talk. It's my personal talk. But I can say that Viv technology will be folded into Bixby going forward. And so it will start to have these properties. I'm going to show you, there's no real public demos of this, although today at Samsung Unpacked event, a new Bixby was announced, previewed, and shown that does have Viv technology in it for the first time. So let me show you this old Viv video that's publicly out there, just to give you a flavor. Welcome to Viv, a next-generation automated assistant. Out of the box, Viv will come preloaded with a number of capabilities offered by premier service providers, and over time, Viv's capabilities will be dramatically expanded by an open marketplace accessible by developers in every industry. Will it be warmer than 50 degrees near Golden Gate Bridge after 5 p.m. the day after tomorrow? I'd like you to send $20 to Marco for drinks last night. And with one click, Marco has the money I owe him. Get me a ride for 6 people to the SAP Center. Viv finds available products that will work for 6 people, and just like that, my ride is on its way. Please send some roses to my wife. Proflowers.com returns with some beautiful options. The Viv interface is always conversational, so you can continue with follow-up queries. How about some tulips instead? I don't actually want to take that Uber ride, so I better cancel it. Cancel my ride, please. These are all live services. Make a reservation at a 4-star hotel with a pool in San Francisco for next weekend. This goes on, but you get the idea. So it's an open ecosystem that any developer will be able to publish services. This is going to be coming out and rolling out under the Bixby brand, kind of a new version of Bixby. That today was the first announcement of this. A special invitation, in a sense, to this audience here. We've now opened up a private beta developer program. And so you can go and apply at bixbydevelopers.com. And what you should do to have success at being chosen is say, I want to use Bixby for this, and describe a use case. Kind of along you've seen kind of a little bit of the style of the interface. It's about getting things done, saving people time. You can book, you can reserve, you can find information, etc. This will roll out likely, I'm not making any official announcements, at the Samsung Developer Conference and be open to the world's developers. And a dramatically different platform. We're not just sending you the string. This system writes its own code dynamically for every user request, so it becomes a collaboration between a human developer and AI to form a custom response for every request from every user individually. This has never been done before, certainly at a scale that we're attempting here. So if you want to get kind of a peek at the future, if you're a developer, you have a great idea, and you want to kind of get in early, feel free to apply at bixbydevelopers.com. I'll give you a little special also preview. I think next week there'll be a Bixby Challenge announcement where there will be prizes of more than $50,000 in 3 categories: most impactful, most creative, and best overall, for developers who have gotten in, the few who have gotten in to the early access program. And so if you have an idea, get in, create something amazing, and maybe win some money or be showcased at Samsung. So closing of my talk, and then we'll open up for questions with what remains. AI is rapidly improving. I mean, beyond my expectations anyway. And it's being applied, maybe not as a panacea, but to real-world business problems. If your company is not looking at AI, maybe you should, in all sorts of industries and spectrums, because the tools and the capabilities are useful today. I make a claim that I think the assistant, if done correctly, can be more impactful than the web and mobile. And that's a huge statement. But if you think of something like, I need to plan a trip to my sister's wedding next month, it's not about voice. It's about assistance. I have to figure out, how do I get there? Where do I stay? What do I buy as a gift? What do I wear? What do I eat? Da, 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 da. Doing that today on your best browser and mouse and whatever, or your best mobile app experience, you still have to keep saying over and over again, it's next Tuesday, I'm bringing 3 people. It's tough. Here are my preferences, my logins, downloads. An assistant that can help me manage tasks will be, I think, for some things, more important than the web or mobile. And finally, so with this picture, I open it up to see if you agree with me or disagree, or if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Great talk, thank you.
Thank you.
What form of software or device do you envision this assistant being? Will it be a chatbot, a robot, piece of software, or all of the above?
Right. So initially, Bixby will roll out through the Samsung device ecosystem. So today it was announced as part of the Note 9 phone. They gave a...
I should have emphasized, ultimately, where does it end up?
The answer for me is one assistant that you access across every device. It could talk to your vacuum cleaner, your air purifier, I don't know. But there will be an open API that will let people innovate on what is the form factor that's right for this device. Maybe it's a robot. I don't know. And I think there are many. I believe there are many. When I'm jogging, my robot's not going to jog along with me, I don't think. Although Big Dog, he can run, or Cheetah, I think Boston Dynamics calls it, can run pretty fast. So I think there will be many devices. I think this will be like Wi-Fi. It'll be embedded everywhere. When you see that symbol, you know that you can connect to it, talk to it. It will know you, access your assistant. It will know you and do things for you.
One quick question. You have predicted an assistant in the sense of personal next generation interface. What do you foresee for businesses? The assistant seems to be more personal oriented than business.
That's a great question. I think like when the iPad first came out, it was a transformative device initially for, you know, maybe showing photos or PowerPoint presentations in a new context and things like that. But ultimately it changed every industry, right? Enterprise, medicine, they're using iPads to do that. Education, there's so many fields that once they had the tools, they could apply their creativity to impact it everywhere. So today, assistants are really thought of as kind of in the Siri mold. Just for consumer, check the weather, send a message. But I think if done right in a scalable way, every industry will be transformed, from entertainment to education to business to agriculture to everything. I think there will be a role both for end consumers of those industries and internally with industries. I will want to use the assistant to mediate my interaction with my doctors. The doctors will be using the assistant to help organize their busy lives.
Thank you, that was really wonderful.
Thank you.
I wonder if I could pretend to be Sherry Turkle for a moment and get your response about emotions and AI.
Emotions in AI?
Yeah, people depending on AI and starting to get emotional with what they're hearing.
Let's see. So there are people, like for instance, Xiao Ice is a chatbot that Microsoft rolls out in China. And when you look at the statistics, it surpasses my expectations how much time human beings spend interacting with this thing, and maybe even depending or codepending on this thing. I don't really know, I haven't done that. My expectation is that's a little creepy and not a great thing.
I think that's what she would say too.
But again, I'm not there yet. There may be some people who really could use that. My mom is in hospice right now and going through this thing, and she's lucky enough to have kids. I'm flying out of here immediately. I've been there for the last couple of weeks to spend time with her during this time. Not everyone may have that. So I don't really know the answer to that kind of emotional connection with machines yet. There may be good uses. I'll stop there.
Especially with children,
Yeah.
because they don't really know the difference.
Yeah, I mean, every technology has unexpected side effects, and that's some of the ethical questions. Like, I was part of the early iPhones coming out, and at least a piece of it. And my son has an iPhone ever since Siri came out, and he's grown up with it. You have access to all the world's information at your fingertips, even by voice. Sounds magical, but there's another side to it as well.
Before, you were talking about how assistants will come to be personalized and help us do many different things. It seems to me that that vision requires a tremendous degree of trust. I don't think we're quite there yet, and in fact, there are a lot of forces in society recently that are eroding that trust.
Yes.
How are we going to get there? How are we going to manage this incredible resource of trust that mostly goes unnoticed in our society?
Right. So trust is probably for assistants more than any other technology, what I call assistants, which can actually help mediate interactions and transactions on your behalf. Trust has to be there because there's a little bit of, not decision factor, but it's getting there, right? So trust is important. What we've done in Viv is at least we make it very, and in Bixby we'll have similar philosophy, we make it very clear what the system knows about you, what the system has decided for you. It lets you change your mind at any time. Like if you say, find movies near my house, it'll say, well, where do you live? Do you want me to remember that? So you should be able to know, if I say yes, what is that going to buy me? I need to know that with one click I can see all the things that it knows about me, being transparent. It knows my house, it knows this preference and that preference. And I need to be able to change my mind and say, you know what, I don't want you to know that anymore. So very granular control and transparency of what a system knows for you or is inferring for you, we think is an essential component to trust. One other statement is, in this world with privacy versus convenience is really this trade-off. And I think we've gone quite far down the path to convenience. I mean, we're online. And in some ways, an assistant doesn't really bring anything new to the security aspects and the privacy aspects, because we're just accessing the same APIs over the same standards that exist today, and you have to decide, do I want to log in or check out as guest? Get my frequent flyer mile extras, but then they know a lot about me, right? So all of those consumer decisions, I think we already have to make today, and an assistant will be accessing the same, you'll have the same decisions across the same technology stacks.
So there's about 4 things I wanted to follow up on. I'll just try and keep it quick. So firstly, I think that, by the way, great talk. We know the trend is going to be for more convenience, and so even if you have the tools to turn it off, that's going to get tricky. I think the whole trust thing is interesting, and this, if you imagine this driving advertising, it gets really interesting. So if someone could get access to your assistant, they could clearly personalise much more. But the big one I want to ask is hacking springs to mind. And when your personal assistant gets hacked, it's going to get really fun.
Oh, absolutely. And again, assistants are really built on the infrastructure that the web and mobile are. So all of the same things are there, but there's this new piece. If truly convenient, you're going to start to do kind of single sign-on like things. So it's kind of like the iPhone, if you can get past the first screen, and if you're logged into all of your apps, a person can do a lot. So if you can hack that one little 4-digit, 6-digit PIN code, or what have you, or replicate your iris or your voice, because you're signed in for convenience on all of these apps, they can do a lot. So again, I'd say yes, an assistant, you know, it's an issue. It's an issue. Continues the technology trend that we have been on for the last 10 or 20 years. I think a lot of the same risks are there, maybe a few new ones, but the fundamental ones, I think, are really shared with mobile and the web.
Oh, here. I'm curious, most of us saw the images of Mark Zuckerberg looking like a deer caught in the headlights at the congressional hearings recently. So I'm curious, in the technology side of things and the developing side of things, is there any thought given to also examining what possible regulatory steps might need to be taken, addressed in the future to sort of in a anticipatory way prevent some of the abuses or oversteps, or understanding how something like this might need to have governmental oversight beforehand, before something like this other gentleman's question happens and somebody gets their whole life stolen and erased like in a science fiction movie?
So I do believe there's a place for regulation for some kinds of things at the right time and moment. So like GDPR in Europe with all the data privacy things, it's causing a lot of, you know, disruption among all the companies who serve users there. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, it's always hard to get regulation right, but I do think there's a role for someone to be really watching out for safety and security of some of our technologies. So I think that's appropriate. I've sometimes heard regulation being said, well, we need to regulate AI because of the threat of the Elon Musk scary, it's going to take over kind of things. And there I kind of defer back to my, you know, Andrew Ng story of the Mars overpopulation issue. I think like the scary general intelligence AI, we don't even have the spark of it. Like we don't, in my view, we're not there yet. There's nothing to regulate. And I think regulation could be early regulation could be just a hindrance and a lot of waste of money and time, because from my perspective, there's just not enough there.
My question was really more that because when you saw the questions that these congressmen were asking, it's obvious that they don't have a real understanding of how, for example, Facebook platform works. So if in the technology and developing side, people who understand could begin to foresee, I mean, would there be a role in that side of things so that then they could go and say, this is where legislation might want to go, instead of after the fact, people who don't understand the technology come in and try to put in either heavy-handed or less than effective types of regulation.
Certainly.
So working along with the development at the same time in a parallel.
Certainly education, educating our representatives out there is always a good idea, right? So yes, I agree that the field, the experts who know some of the things should try to impart some of that knowledge before big decisions are made by people who don't understand the nuances of it. And it's hard for, they have to know so many different things. It's hard to become expert at that. So yeah, I think organizations should be working with Washington to help teach, to be able to make reasoned decisions, and we all can too, in certain ways. Make your voice heard, and hopefully there'll be enough people who are knowledgeable enough to inform views that will then trickle up to Washington.
What do you think are the ethical implications of putting a stock trading program out there that has the benefit of AI-based evolution to come up with the optimal algorithms to trade against mere humans who have not had that kind of opportunity to optimize?
I mean, I tend to think of stock trading as gambling. I mean, at some level. And it's kind of a game of chance. And so there's a lot of randomness. So I don't think there'll ever be a perfect algorithm that, guarantees, guarantees winner. So for me, it's a tool. I think just like in sports gambling, I'm sure there are some hackers who are cobbling together data science algorithms to give them an edge to win who's going to beat the big game. So from an ethical point of view, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, applying tools to win in a game of chance, why not? Why not? So for me, I'm more interested in AI being applied to areas where it can really make a difference. It can put food in people's mouths better. It can prolong lives and reduce costs and issues like that. So I don't know. That's the best I have for you right now.
Thanks for a great talk. You presented a very interesting vision of the assistant as being this UI of the future. Seems to me that what will make this succeed, if it does, is a very low friction way for the assistant to learn about new things that exist, to adopt new capabilities, et cetera. So, with the previous web, a web developer didn't have to do anything for a Google search engine to find it and list it in the web. Here, there's going to be some mechanism for discovery of new capabilities. You hinted a little bit about what's going on in Bixby. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit, and also interested in your opinion about whether web ontologies or anything like that could help this discovery process become more automated and allow your assistant to become more capable over time without the personal involvement of a developer adding a specific capability to that assistant.
Yeah, that's a great series of questions. I'll say one thing that I don't necessarily think that low friction to create new services is the key. If you think about Objective-C, Objective-C was hard language for a lot of web developers to learn, but there was a business reason to do so. So I do think you need to trade off ease of development, and it needs to be as easy as it can be, but it needs to be good enough that it really works at scale. And so that's just kind of part one. In terms of web ontologies, at some level, I've worked at a lot of companies that had ontologies and standards and tried to do this. Our approach, and my view after years of doing that, is we want to allow multiple representations to flourish and incentivize people to collaborate. But if you want to join the standards body who's defining the ontology in a particular space and kind of sharing knowledge, there should be benefit to that, but you shouldn't be obliged. If you want to create your own restaurant model that's different from the official ones, have at it. And one of the technologies, our dynamic program generation or automated planning algorithms, help smooth out some of the disfluencies between different representation models. So things can join as long as there's a path. Maybe there's a transformer that'll get inserted or what have you. But I think, so my general view of the representation thing should be decentralized. There should be pluses to collaborating and sharing, but not mandates for it. And then on the discovery, how do you discover something new? What I'll say about that is, I don't want an assistant that does everything. I want an assistant that does everything I need. And there's a difference. There's a difference. And an 11-year-old boy and a CEO, they're going to have different needs. And so you need a way that a user can understand the space of what the assistant can do and easily augment it and reshape it dynamically in the current use. I don't want to go to the App Store. I want to ask a question, and if it doesn't do it today, I want to easily have it do it in 10 minutes from now. So that's kind of the hints I'll give you in that area. But stay tuned.
One last question.
Will assistants be portable between services? So will my assistant be, can I move it from Google to Amazon, let's say?
So I think Microsoft and Amazon did a partnership between Cortana and Alexa a while ago. And I went to a panel and I said, raised a question, and I said, so are you going to have to say, Cortana, ask Alexa to ask weather.com to find the weather? Is that the story there? And they're kind of squirming in their seat, and they're like, yeah, kind of. And so, to me, I'm not that interested. Maybe I'm biased, but the interoperability across different assistants. I want one assistant that knows what I want, can do the things I need, that I can customize and expand and configure. That's what I want. I also mentioned earlier, there's usually a major and a minor with each of these paradigms. So, iOS and Android, Internet Explorer and Netscape, whatever. There's usually, you don't want a monopoly. There's always a little bit the other side. But so I think there will be two assistants that emerge. I don't think they'll be that interoperable or compatible, just like Mac and PC aren't that. There'll be some connections, but that's my view.
So clearly lots of good questions, and we could go on forever, but we have to stop. If you enjoyed this, please join us next week for a forum on the 3 laws of communication, Jean-Luc Dumont. But with that, let's thank Adam for a wonderful talk.